Well, welcome back to part 3, and this is the final part of building the graveyard from from the Bones 3 Kickstarter. Um, in part 2, you saw me paint everything up. Between videos, I added a little bit of brown here for where we're going to put dirt. In this section of the tutorial, I'm actually going to be using a myriad of materials to give this a fairly realistic look. Starting with actual dirt, which is going to go, I'm going to make a mound of it here for the fresh grave and line the open grave with it to give it some texture. I've got some aggregate, or rocks as they call it, that I got from my local craft store. Believe it or not, with rocks we're going to have to paint them to make them look real. I'm going to put a couple of those in, and I've got a piece of pine bark that I just love the shape of that will be also painted to be a rock. For our pathway, I've got model rocks and playground sand, which once again will have to be painted to get the proper texture, well, proper colors. Got Spanish moss, which comes in little clumps, and I will show you in this video how to turn these into bushes, and we'll have a couple browning bushes. I've also got some clump foliage, which I've got this pack and Cinerama. I bought this at Michael's, and I got this in my local Train Hobby Shop. These are not necessary, but they do help with the overall look and feel. Citadel Miniatures, Privateer Press, several different companies sell these clumps of grass. In a future tutorial, I'll teach you how to make these, but these help add some texture to your terrain. We're going to use these. They just peel off and you stick them on. And lastly, the two finishing, well, not lastly, but close to last. This is called flock. What it is colored sawdust. And this gives the impression of grass on a surface. And this is static grass. This is grass that's a little taller. I'm going to show you how to use this, the clumps of grass, the flock, to make realistic grass for the entire piece. And also, this is unnecessary, but I love them. I have scale model leaves. Now, for most of this, we're actually going to be using wood glue. I like Gorilla Glue. It's my personal favorite. It mixes with water well. It hardens pretty quickly. It holds the stuff to it really well. And the final thing that I'm going to be doing, and this is after we get the base completed, I've got some ground up pastel. And if you take a good look at that, that's about the color of rust. We're going to mix that and Reikland Flesh Shade, which is one of the washes I talked about. Actually, technically it's a shade, but we use it as a wash. It's one of the washes I talked about in the second part of this tutorial. And we're going to use this and this to make this gate, well, this fence and this gate look rusty. But that's going to be the last thing we do. For now, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. I've been thinking about what I want to start with. I'm probably going to start with the path, and then some tufts of grass, then the stones, then a couple patches of static grass, and some flock. Finish it up with the actual dirt, and well, let's see how it comes out. Now, when you use the wood glue, I use Gorilla Glue because it's nice and strong. I mix it approximately 2/3. Well, in this case, I've got a little too much wood glue in there, but I mix just a little bit of water. And you can see I'm not even bothering to use clean water because that was my paint water from earlier. You mix it thoroughly, and then you paint it onto the area you want to use. It thins it down just a little bit, and the main reason for that is not for flow, but so you have time to work with it, because it starts to dry pretty much instantly. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take it and paint it on the area that I painted brown for the path, just like that. As with a lot of this, it doesn't need to be neat because we're going to put more glue on here later. And I've already got rocks open, so I don't really think I need to open another pack. I'm going to take and sprinkle some rocks out here, just like that. It adds some texture to the path. And then I want to take and pinch sand. I want to try to avoid the big pieces and sprinkle it pretty heavily over that path. Because what I'm going to end up doing here in a minute is working on a couple other things while that dries a little bit, and then we'll shake that off and paint it. Tap it in to make sure it sticks. Always put your lids back on, because then, well, otherwise you will, without a doubt, spill. I'm going to brush this off here because I'm thinking that this area looks a little bare, which is why I got my nice big rock over here. Now, I'm going to use hot glue to affix my rocks. And unlike the section before, we don't have to worry about it burning anything. Just want to get enough on there though. Pull your strings off, stick it down, and it's gonna look, well, like a rock, believe it or not. And I'm gonna pick a couple more rocks that I think are pretty interesting and go ahead and throw them on. Let me see here. Oh, that's it. I like that one. Doing the exact same thing. You can put him over there. Pull the damn string off. And let's put one right up against the edge of the cathedral there. Because why not? Now I want to give that a moment to cool, so I'm going to go ahead and pull my grass tufts out and start applying them. Make sure it's still recording. Yes, we are. And the grass tufts, there's a couple spots that I did not get completely covered with the caulk. So literally you can cover up a multitude of sins with grass, and we're going to do a lot of that in this tutorial. But literally you pull these off and you stick them on. When you make them yourself, it's a little more complex, but oops, I have my flock in the way. But when you're making them, they literally just stick right on at that time. And as you can see, I'm just putting a couple. And I'll probably, when I'm done, put one here or set some moss. But I'm going to stick one there just because it looks shiny. It's just enough to give some character to what is relatively flat. Now, by now, these have cooled and they are fixed firmly, believe it or not. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to tap this sand back, try to get as much back in your container as possible. I know that's not really possible. And if you take a look here, we have a path. We're going to end up painting that, but to make sure that glue is dry, I'm going to hit it with a little bit of a heat. By the way, be careful when you're using a heat gun that you don't put your fingers in front of it, because this thing gets incredibly hot. Now, before we do anything else, I think it would probably be best to start painting these. So I'm going to grab my pavement. Now, I think I need another grass tuft. Where did I put those? Nope. There they are. I also think that my path over here needs to be a little denser, so I'm going to put some more glue on it after I dip my paper towel in it. I'm going to flank my gate with little tufts of grass, or I'm going to put it right on the pillar there. I'm skilled. Okay. And what I just did there was added those two little tufts right here. Now, I don't think that this is dense enough for what I want to do, so I'm going to go ahead and apply more glue just right over the top of it. Once you've already got sand and particulate down, you have to dab it on, because if you brush, you lose everything you already got on there. And for the record, for a piece this size, you are going to go through quite a bit of glue. It may not seem like much when you're doing it, but when you do a lot of these, you go through a lot of it. And yes, I'm basically making a puddle of glue here, because that'll make it a little thicker. And take my sand. And when you're doing this, normally you won't have access to a heat gun. Just wait. Be patient. Also, when you're using a heat gun, be careful that you don't, in this case, I don't want to melt my styrofoam that's under here. I don't want to melt my plastic that's here, but it just aids in the drying process. So, I got some of that in my open grave and all over the floor. So while we're waiting for that to dry to the point where I can actually clear it, I'm going to take and line my open grave with glue. And then some dirt to actually give it a realistic texture. If you need to know where to find dirt, then I recommend that you not be doing this. Now, the dirt I'm using is actually a gardening dirt, so it's got pieces of what they call vermiculite in it. I personally think that it looks a lot like, like stones. But you tap that down in there and let it rest. Now, to do the fresh earth here, I should probably wait until I'm ready to tap everything else off. But I'm gonna be ambitious and see if we can get it to stick. Because why not? We're gonna take some of the glue we mixed up, drop it over here, and we are literally going to put dirt in it. Then we're going to mix it up and make a nice dirt paste. You should remember this from when you were a kid. We're making mud pies. The proper amount I don't know. Just mix it till it looks good and till it looks like it'll stay. Like that. That to me looks pretty good. For the record, I would recommend using like popsicle sticks or something for this part, so you don't ruin your brush like I almost did. Give me 1 second. See if I can reach that with my mic. Or in this case, coffee stirrers. Ow, that hurt. And what we're going to do is we're literally going to take this, scoop it out of here. Pat it down. Maybe, if it wants to cooperate. And then we can use the stick to shape it. And if all else fails, use your fingers and a little bit of water. And then take and sprinkle just a little bit more, because the glue will dry a little shiny. And yes, this is messy. I'm going to set that one aside because now it's no use to me. Apply a little bit of heat. Until everything's set. And while this is setting up a little bit more, we're going to go ahead and dry brush those rocks. And this is how you move quickly on all this stuff. You can do one thing at a time, but once you get the hang of it, there's really no need. Now, hopefully, that dirt will have set to the point that I can actually tap this off. I'm not going to try to recover these materials, so I'm going to tap them off into a shopping bag. And now we're turning the grave upside down. And there we go. We have a path with some rocks that once that is entirely dry, and it's getting there, we'll be able to paint just like we did the stones. We've got a fresh grave that actually looks like a... Would you agree, Bo, that looks like a fresh grave?
Oh, definitely.
And a freshly dug grave. And a lump of dirt and snot, evidently. Now, looking along here, I personally think that this needs a couple bushes. We've got little tufts of grass, but really a place like this is gonna be overgrown. So I'm thinking a nice little bush here. Since I've got an uneven edge here, I was thinking put a bush there. Definitely one right here, and probably one growing out from under here and one by this rock. My main reason for doing it over by this rock is because I missed a spot and it will hide my sin, of which there seem to be many. So, you're going to take, you can get, it's moss, it's technically Spanish moss. This stuff, smell that, Bo. Smells amazing. I actually incorporated, yeah, I'm ridiculous. I incorporated into some of my showpieces because of the way it smells, honestly. But it's all squishy and poofy, and you take and pinch it. You want to make a flat edge by pulling some off, and you apply hot glue, and you got a happy little bush. So this one is going to go right here. You apply the hot glue directly to it, and in this case I will recommend that you be very careful not to apply it directly to your fingers. I have done that in the past, and let me tell you. Now the reason I'm doing the bushes first is because the hot glue will not really stick to the flock and static grass, and you want to make sure that that's in there. And that's looking properly overgrown. Would you agree?
Oh yeah.
We're literally minutes, well, a couple minutes from being done. Before we move on, this is dried to the point where we can do this. We want to take and knock the loose pieces off because they're going to come loose when we paint them. Some of them stay, some of them don't. I've found often, oops, that's a piece of glue. Often when we're using rocks, we have to glue the individual rocks down before we apply the sand. So we want that to be kind of a dirt color. So I'm going to mix a chocolate brown, well, it's pavement, crud. I don't have my chocolate brown in here, but I'll mix pavement and the dove gray for the starting here. And because that's a very rough surface, I'm going to add about half a brush full of water there. I have a heat gun. And that'll dry pretty quick because I didn't put that much water in it. That is a really nasty color, isn't it, Bo?
Yeah, I like it though.
We're going to give that a couple minutes to dry while I work on everything else. Okay. That's had a little bit of time to dry. I hit it with the heat gun and managed to burn my bush a little bit. So we're going to let that dry naturally while we work on a couple other things. Now, I've got my tufts of grass, but not all grass is going to be that tall. Not all grass is going to be as short as the flock. So we're going to use a thing called static grass. On a piece this big, it is best to not cover it entirely in static grass because it just won't look right. But you can get static grass, and I'm using my brush instead of my dropper now. You can get static grass at your local hobby store. I've gotten it at our local gaming store, Plus One Games, in Metairie, Louisiana. Yeah, Jeremy, shameless plug. And I've also gotten it at a local train store. I can't remember the name of it, but it's over in Kenner. And I got a lot of it.
Yeah, that's way.
So what we're going to do here is we're literally going to paint on sections that we want to be taller than the flock. And then you take this, you literally have trouble opening it. Well, that's stupid that it has a shaker on it, because that doesn't want to work. Take a huge pinch, sprinkle it on like this. You pile it on and you tamp it down. And then here in a minute, we're going to shake it off and tap the board, and it will actually make the grass stand on end. Now, the other reason for doing this is not all grass is the same color, and my flock and my static grass are two different colors. I mean, literally, you just take a huge chunk and put it on there like this, and you tap it down. Yeah, you tap a lot of stuff down. We'll be back. This is not dry yet, so I'm going to texture it later. But right now, as you can see, I've already done the static grass. I've recovered most of it, tapped it off, so now we've got standing patches of grass. The two things we're going to do right now is I'm going to be using my flock, which I've got in a bag here. I'm going to add some moss growing in the cracks on these walls, which is really easy to do. You just paint some glue onto it, and then then you sprinkle some flock onto it and let it sit. When you tap it off, it will be nice and clear, and it'll be nice and mossy. And once again, as usual, tap your material in. That way you get as much as you can into the glue. And I've got a crack over on this side that I'm going to put it into. And normally I would try to recover as much of that as possible, but I'm running on a time crunch because my camera op's got to go very soon. So I'm going to just shake this a little bit off, but so you can see what this does and how it looks. It's a really, really good effect. I'm just going to shake this off into the trash can. And I don't recommend doing it a lot, because too much of a good thing is never good. But right there, and right there, we've got moss growing on our rocks. Now for this next section, I'm going to go ahead and mix up a couple measures of glue. That way I can move extremely quickly and get this done. I'm going to go ahead and do the texturing out of video and do the rust out of video, and I will do a separate tutorial for both of those at a later time. But we will actually post finished pictures probably in the Reaper Minis page and on our web page as soon as we get that done. That's going to be www.savagelightstudios.com/nat20, and we will have a link to that in the description of all three of the parts of this tutorial. So what we're doing now is I'm going to take my wide brush, and we are literally taking everything. Whoops, too much water. I didn't dry my brush out. That was silly of me. I'm going to take this, I'm literally going to brush it on every place that has exposed grass. And we're going to go relatively quickly because you have to work fast because the glue will start to dry and then your flock won't stick. And because of the way grass grows in real life, don't worry if, oops, spilled some. Don't worry if you get it in places that you don't think the grass really should be, because grass tends to grow anywhere. Here in New Orleans, we end up with it growing out of buildings. And as you go, you're going to sprinkle your flock. I'm going to go ahead and turn off that fan because Bo was right. And I'm going to have to sweep the heck out of this room later. You don't want to get it at the edge of where you're working because you want to be able to keep working and it'll get caught in your brush. Okay, I took it out and tapped it off, and when you do that you'll see a couple spots that you missed. Just go back, hit them with glue, and then put more flock on it. But Bo's going to come down here and show you what we've got. And like I said, I've got a couple spots that need some touch up, but not much. And when it dries, the color is going to even out a bit. For some of these, you can add a little bit more water because you're on already existing flock. But aside from that, I think that this looks pretty darn good. And all that's really left is to texture the rock over here and do my rust. And I may not do the rust. I haven't decided yet. But this is the graveyard. I'm actually just going to flip it over and tap it off because I can recover it from here. And there we go. And actually, I'm not going to bother because there's not enough there to actually worry about. So real quickly, I'm going to texture that stone and then we will be done. And when I say real quickly, this is going to be very, very fast. Dry brush, remember the slate gray I was using? Dry brush, saturate with paint, rub it off, and then just drag it across the stones of this path. And Bo, if you want to get close-ups on that, and not my mess. And that's how you do a graveyard scene. And thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on Nat 20.